climate or environment, universities are key. Human capital is even more important. Ongoing funding for new companies to get started are vital. And ultimately, we live in a world where, in a sense, economies succeed or fail as an ecosystem. Often an ecosystem built around certain waves of innovation and certain areas of industry. One of the things that BCG did was analyze how Vancouver and Seattle stack up. We need to add data on Portland to this mix, clearly. What I always find the most interesting about this slide is that when you compare Seattle and Vancouver to many of the other great cities, not just in North America, but frankly in the world, whether we're talking about Europe or Asia or elsewhere, we actually lead in the one area where I think it's most important to lead: people, human capital. We have attracted incredibly talented and diverse people to our region. And we have a number of other areas where we're strong, even if we're not quite in the pole position. Research universities are one of them. This whole focus on building an ecosystem is another. And we have some other areas where we have more work to do, especially in unleashing more capital from the venture capital community to go to startups and the like. But as we look at this data, I think it reminds us to some degree that we too can look at this region the way people did centuries ago. It is an opportunity to think about the connections between us and how we build the kind of Cascadia Corridor that Alan Bushell talked about over 25 years ago. Certainly as a company, and as you heard, we've had some exciting opportunities even over the past year to learn more, to think more, to imagine more about what we might all put together. That's because of the work that we've been doing in Vancouver as we opened our new Microsoft Vancouver Development Center. And as you heard, just a year after we opened it, we are approaching 700 employees. We made a commitment to invest $300 million over 3 years. And what is most exciting to me is how this is not only providing a wonderful opportunity in return for Microsoft, especially in new technology fields like augmented and virtual reality, but it is helping connect us with the growing technology ecosystem in Vancouver. We're in a wonderful location in the heart of the city. I think it's the only place that I know of in the world where people can work at Microsoft and at lunchtime take the elevator downstairs and shop at another Seattle icon, Nordstrom. That alone is sometimes enough to get some of our employees interested in moving. We've had incredible support from the Canadian government, from the local and provincial level to the country as a whole. Certainly symbolized by the Prime Minister's involvement in our very unveiling. And as you heard, the conversations that we've had the opportunity to participate in about this whole notion of a Cascadia Corridor have now rippled beyond Cascadia and the Pacific Northwest. And they've been getting major treatment, whether it's in the New York Times or in The Economist or literally around the world. People have realized that, as Governor Inslee said, there actually is something pretty special in the water out here. And we're certainly privileged to have the opportunity to drink it together. Of course, it's not Kool-Aid, because we have our challenges as well as our opportunities. And we're all familiar with them. In fact, if you've driven here from Olympia or Seattle or from Vancouver itself, we have some challenges around infrastructure and traffic and roads. But we also have challenges and even bigger opportunities when we think about innovation itself. And that's why we've thought it's so important to focus not just on a vision and not just a conversation about our problems, but to really lay out clear objectives and even milestones for the creation of a Cascadia Corridor. And that, in many ways, in my opinion, was one of the most valuable things that came out of the conference that took place in Vancouver last September. We were very privileged in May when Prime Minister Trudeau visited us at Microsoft, and we had the chance to talk with him and the finance minister and other Canadian officials about the work that is underway, about the milestones we've reached, about the challenges that we are encountering, and above all else, the new opportunities that lie ahead. There are many things that we need to do if we're going to build a corridor that fuels the future of the economy in this part of North America. I would be, however, the first to say that of all of the things that we need to do, one of the most important is to invest in the next generation of our people. Their learning, their study, their advances. And again, it is both impressive to see the assets on which we can build and even some of the progress we're starting to make. It may start with great institutions like the Oregon Health Science University here in Portland, one of the great teaching hospitals in North America. But quickly what we are finding is that our best opportunities come not just from what individual institutions are doing by themselves, but by the research partnerships that we are starting to focus on together. That's why it was so exciting last September to see a new partnership emerge between the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Institute in Seattle and with the BC Cancer Agency and others across the border. We have in this part of North America some of the great research facilities, some of the great researchers and scientists in addressing what is obviously one of the great health challenges of our time, curing cancer. And if we cure cancer together, we can go faster together and in the process strengthen each of the cities in which we live. It starts with research like that, but it certainly doesn't end there. It's why we at Microsoft said we would step up and make a commitment to start generating more cross-border research. We had a chance to talk with the presidents of the University of British Columbia, or UBC, and the University of Washington about the great work that was going on in each institution, including in the fields of data science, a field that is just fundamental for the future. But what we learned was that despite having these two great research institutions, they were doing very little collaborative work together. In fact, over the prior decade, they estimated that they had only done about $500,000 worth of collaborative research. That is what inspired us to make a $1 million grant so that over 2 years, there could be new work in the field of urban analytics and data science for social good, bringing together faculty and students this summer and next summer to look at how we can use data science to address some of our infrastructure problems around traffic, but also infrastructure challenges and issues around electricity and water, and even a big topic I know here this week, the challenges for making our communities more resilient. It's also why we as a company stepped forward and made a $40 million grant for a one-of-a-kind partnership between the University of Washington and Tsinghua University in Beijing to build on the east side of Seattle a new institution with a new campus called GIX, the Global Innovation Exchange, that will open its doors on the 14th of September and bring together students and faculty from two major institutions across the Pacific. And it's why we've been so enthusiastic about the opportunity to then partner with other institutions, including UBC and other great universities, so we can start to bring together the leading thinkers in important fields and they can learn from each other. We're very excited by the fact that the first group of students will start this fall. We'll have a new building and it will open its doors, as I mentioned, on the 14th of September, which is actually the day after this year's Cascadia conference. Just as last year's conference was in Vancouver, this year's conference is in Seattle. I hope you'll consider coming. because it's an opportunity not just to hear about what we're doing, but more importantly, to do again this year what everybody did last year. Bring people together and make some decisions about what we want to go do together, and then keep working to get them done. And as we think about these things, it's not just the east side of Seattle. I think as we've certainly appreciated being in Vancouver, Vancouver has an amazing asset and an amazing opportunity in Robson Square. Right in the center of one of the most beautiful cities in the world. You see a building and you see a couple blocks of land that fortuitously are owned by the province that can be put to work if the provincial government wants to continue to press ahead, as we hope it will, to create a great center of learning that will help educate a new generation of people in computer science and data science and these other fields that are so important. If we continue to advance in these areas and build on what I think is already some important progress, we will take that human capital asset and we will make it even stronger. And then we can think about the other things that we're focused on that we need to continue to address as well. Things to strengthen our regional ties, including the ability to move faster from place to place. As you heard, we do need this so-called Nerdbird, a seaplane that can take off in Lake Union in Seattle and land in the harbor in Vancouver. Now, in some ways, this is the least innovative idea you could possibly imagine. First of all, it literally uses aircraft that are over 50 years old. They're beautifully maintained, they're very safe. I don't want to cause anyone to hesitate. I've flown on them many times myself. As I said, you can get on one of these planes in Seattle and you can go to Victoria, you can go to Nanaimo, you can go to Campbell River, you can go to Port McNeill, you can go to islands that you have never heard of. You just can't go to Vancouver. And as we made the case, including to the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister and the Innovation Minister and anybody who's a minister of anything, we need to get this flying. Because it will help people move faster, in part between Seattle and Vancouver. Heck, we've even committed as a company that if they'll just get the thing in the air, we'll buy a bunch of seats for our employees, because they're going back and forth all the time between Vancouver and Seattle. With a little bit of luck, the final government approvals will be in place so that by next spring, this will be a reality and not just an attractive photo on a slide. Of course, that's just part of what we need. And of course, as all of us appreciate, it's actually pretty hard to take a seaplane in January when the fog is almost at sea level. What we really need are new modes of transportation, whether it's autonomous cars or high-speed rail. And it's why we were so pleased that Governor Inslee called on the Washington State Legislature to fund a high-speed rail feasibility study. A study that would look at what it really takes to connect our region better together. Why not a high-speed train from Vancouver to Seattle to Portland? If we lived in Europe, it would already be there. And why not have the vision to think about not just trains, but automobiles? There is room for great roads with great vehicles, including autonomous vehicles, and great rail as well. And if the future holds new promise for new modes of transportation, great, let's consider that as well. But we need to raise our sights and our ambition level as a region. It's why we at Microsoft were so enthusiastic about the governor's proposal and the legislature's action that we're writing a check for $50,000 to further aid the work that needs to be done for this feasibility study. Of course, if you're going to go across the border, it actually helps if the immigration authorities let you in. That is a bigger issue in 2017 than it was a year ago. And it's why we've been so consistent and outspoken and even passionate as a company in calling out the value that people bring every day when they're able to cross the border. It's why we believe in healthy immigration policies that enable people, including high-skilled people, to come live in our midst and be our neighbors and contribute to our economies and travel back and forth between Canada and the United States. It's why we're also an outspoken advocate for NAFTA. I happened to be in Washington, D.C. earlier this year, the day after it seemed for a few hours like NAFTA might even go away. And I was fortunate because the next morning I had the opportunity to chair a breakfast with the Secretary of Commerce and introduce him. And what I pointed out as I sat next to him and introduced him to the group was this. There's a lot of discussion about the border between the United States and Mexico, and we have a border where 4 states border Mexico. But we also need to keep in mind, the United States is a country with 13 states that border Canada. There are 78 counties in those 13 states that border Canada. 68 of those 78 states actually helped elect the President of the United States, the President of the United States. And I don't personally believe that the counties that voted in favor of the President did so because they wanted to close the border with Canada. We appreciate as a company, we understand every day that our success depends not just on trade and immigration and the economic ties, but the fact that we have neighbors. And that is as valuable as anything. And we need to continue to bring the needs of our neighbors and the importance of building our collective neighborhoods to Washington, D.C. and elsewhere. And we need to remind, we think, our country and frankly every country, that at the end of the day, if you really care about innovation, it's really important to have diversity. The best ideas come when you get people together who think differently, who come from different parts of the planet, who come from different backgrounds, different races, different religions, different ethnicities, different genders. These are the people that we see at Microsoft defining and building our future every day. And we fundamentally do believe that this is something that is important, not just for the tech sector, but is contributing to every sector in the economy. It does mean, at the end of the day, that it's important for us to bring digital skills to every part of the economy. And even though there's so much innovation happening in major cities like Vancouver and Seattle and Portland, we can't lose sight for the moment of the opportunity that exists in every community, including every community in the provinces and states that are represented here today. That's why I was very enthusiastic 2 weeks ago to have the opportunity to stand up in Washington, D.C. and talk about another problem that we're passionate about that I think is one felt every day by your neighbors, our neighbors. If I just talk for a moment on what's happening on one side of the border, there are still 34 million Americans that don't have access to broadband. And of those 34 million people, 23.4 million live in rural communities. As we got ready for that speech, we accessed the data that was held by the Federal Communications Commission, and we used our products to create a map of the United States. And what this map shows is countries in dark green where 2/3 or more of the people have access to broadband, but still not necessarily 100%. But the countries that are not colored in, those are counties, the counties where 1/3 or less of the population has access to broadband. And in the middle, you have counties where it's between 1/3 and 2/3 of the people. Guess what? It's almost everywhere. And it certainly covers major parts of the Pacific Northwest in the United States. And what we've come to appreciate as we've done more work in Canada is, of course, you see similar challenges in rural communities in provinces in Canada as well. The first thing we think is so important to recognize is that broadband access has become a necessity of life. if you want to take advantage of telemedicine and access a doctor, if you want to take advantage of where agriculture is going with precision farming, if you want to take advantage of the best opportunities to build a small business, or if you just want to learn and get an education, there's a world of difference today between having a broadband connection and being stuck, literally, in the dial-up era. That's why we launched in Washington 2 weeks ago a new initiative, what we're calling our Rural Airband Initiative. It uses new spectrum that traditionally has been used by television stations, the UHF spectrum, a spectrum that is very beneficial for this purpose, because if any of us recall those days where we had these rabbit ears on television sets, those signals went over hills. They went through the walls of our houses. They went through trees. And it is spectrum with new technology that we can put to work to solve this problem. It's called TV white spaces spectrum. And with the work that's being done to bring down the cost of manufacturing the chips for the devices, we can use this spectrum to close the broadband gap. When I was in Washington 2 weeks ago, we said that the United States should create a national goal, a goal to completely eliminate the rural broadband gap in 5 years by the 4th of July 2022. And we said that we not only believed in this as something that we would advocate, but we would make investments and take steps to help advance. That we would make our own investments in rural areas to bring with telecommunications partners new broadband connectivity to 2 million people who do not have it. We said we don't want to enter the telecommunications business, and we're not even going to make a profit from this work. We will invest in capital, we will partner with telecommunications companies, we will ask for a revenue share, but for the next 5 years, we will reinvest every dollar we make to expand coverage, to bring it to more places. We said we'd kickstart this by getting 12 projects going in 12 states in 12 months. By the time this lunch is over, we'll probably be coloring in Oregon and Idaho and Montana. But we know that this is a place we need to bring around the country. We know that there's an opportunity in Canada as well. That's why we want to move forward and explore a project to get started in British Columbia, in a rural community there where this access doesn't exist. And over time, we want to take this to other parts of these and other countries. If there's one reason we are so passionate about this, it's because of the people we've met and the work we've already done and what we've learned from them. Because we've been investing in this technology for a decade. We've pursued 20 projects in 17 countries. We've brought this to rural Africa and rural Asia and rural Latin America, and we know that it has a place in North America as well. We saw this past year when we brought our first project to the state of Virginia, in the southern part of the state, to a rural community. And we got to meet some people who did things they had never done before. They didn't just excite us, they inspired us. I hope they'll inspire you too. Take a moment to watch this.
Just because you live in a rural area doesn't mean you shouldn't have the opportunity to be connected.
That was about, I'd say, 9th grade year is when I began taking college classes through dual enrollment. And that requires that you upload papers and assignments to the college as well as to the high school. The internet was terrible at home, so I'd have to do my assignments really early, like a whole month early.
He had to submit a lot of his paperwork. It's just gonna sit there and just spin and spin and spin.
You know that the deadline's coming, and you know you need more research, and you know it's not enough. It's a struggle.
In the beginning of the semester, one of the questions I asked the students, just a show of hands, who has internet access? And typically, just a few. Right there, that tells me that I have to be a little limited in any kind of homework assignment I give. It's a handicap for teachers in the 21st century. I mean, here we are, hands are kind of tied.
The homework gap is a major problem for our region. And the exciting part is that Charlotte and Halifax County, our two pilot areas, are no longer going to be left behind in this digital divide. TV white space is a new technology that the FCC has allowed vendors to transmit broadband connections wirelessly over previously unused airwaves. Rural markets specifically, it is critical to have access to that lower band spectrum that allows internet providers to serve that last mile affordably. The goal is by fall to have about 250 connected, and we're hoping to have 1,000 families connected soon after that.
It's going to open the doors to economic development and allow the people in our area to have access to a world-class education.
It was a dramatic increase in productiveness and efficiency.
Dylan has a small antenna at his home, which is connected to a TV white space device, turns on his laptop, connects via Wi-Fi.
I don't know the tech side. All I know is it works.
Now that I have TV white space internet, I can use the cloud, and my grade actually shot up. Going forward with TV white space, I got high B's and A's.
This is where I grew up and I love it. I'm a country girl. Just train our kids so they can stay home and have that knowledge, and then they can bring it back here so that our community can grow.
TV white space held up very well with my college application. Once I graduate, I'll be going to attend Old Dominion University in the fall, studying computer science. And very excited to go.
That is the future we have the opportunity to create for kids and adults everywhere. And we know it'll take connectivity and it will take the solving of hard problems, but we believe we can bring people together to solve them together. We know that we need to add to that connectivity new investments in digital skills. That's why we announced a multi-year, multi-million-dollar partnership with the National Council for the 4-H in the United States. These are the kinds of things that we can think about in the years ahead. The kinds of things that can bring together the opportunities in cities and the connections with great rural communities as well. As we think ahead, I hope that we can continue to be inspired by our past, by symbols like the Peace Arch, and perhaps even more so, by the people who made that Peace Arch possible. You may know or you may not that it's a story that really connected British Columbia with Washington State and Oregon. It's a story that started with one man, Sam Hill, who grew up and then lived in Minneapolis, but who moved to Seattle in 1900. And although he had made his fortune in rail, he developed a passion for automobiles. He saw a future where cars would connect our region together. He befriended the former mayor of Victoria, a man named Alfred Todd, who was the first person on Vancouver Island to get a driver's license. And together they evangelized a vision, first in Washington State, and then here in Oregon and up and down the West Coast. The two of them got together, they partnered with others, and they said there needed to be a Columbia River Highway. And then they helped to build it. They dreamed of a highway that would stretch up and down the West Coast, and they didn't start in Vancouver with the vision of stopping in Portland. They were determined to make it all the way to Mexico. Along the way, Sam Hill realized what a beautiful corner of the country the Columbia River represented. He made the investment to build what is still there as a museum that started as the center of an area that would have 10 miles of paved roads to show the country what paved roads could bring. But as they made their way further south, as they realized the challenges between the United States and Mexico, challenges that even existed over a century ago, they also reflected on what a unique and special heritage there was that connected the United States and Canada. It was a time where a generation had experienced World War I, but it appreciated that a century before, the Treaty of Ghent had literally created the longest undefended border in the world. And they said that the countries needed to come together to build a new arch to commemorate the centennial of that Treaty of Ghent that would forever unite our peoples on both sides of the border. That is what they built. And as the arch came to fruition, they decided, in another great tradition worth emulating, that it was a great cause for a great party. And so it was on the 6th of September, 1921, that this photograph was taken. And people came together from the Pacific Northwest. They came together from the United States and Canada to celebrate and commemorate this peace arch and to pledge themselves to what we all had the opportunity to build together. 4 years and a few months from now, we will have the opportunity to have another party because we can celebrate the centennial of that peace arch. And when the September the 6th, 2021 comes around, by a wonderful coincidence, it will already be a holiday on both sides of the border. Because that year, September the 6th is a Monday, and it's the day when we have off for Labor Day. That is another thing we believe we should do. We should agree that we're going to come together not just for great conferences like this, not just the Cascadia conferences that are helping us move forward, but that we look ahead to 2021, we pledge ourselves to make the kind of progress that will be worth celebrating, and then we too can bring together people from two great nations that make up one amazing region. Thank you very much.